Let me bring in Brett Tolman now. He's a former U.S. attorney and the executive director of Right on Crime. Brett, good to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
What do you make of Alvin Bragg's move? So no sentencing now. We'll just wait for over 4 years. What does that do to a president?
I can't think of anything more unconstitutional than perhaps the bringing of the case in the first place. But let's address, on the merits substantively, does he have a leg to stand on? And the reality is you cannot prosecute a sitting president. We know that. There's a reason why you cannot prosecute a sitting president. Many people have erroneously said that he has a felony conviction. That's not true. The felony does not get entered until the judge issues what's called a judgment and conviction, which does not occur until after the sentencing. So you don't have a convicted felon. He has a right to a speedy trial. He's the incoming president of the United States. I cannot think of any more abuse of power that I've seen in my 35 years of looking at criminal justice systems in this country than what Alvin Bragg is trying to do now.
Yeah, and this is. I mean, there's been so many of these things, but this case involved a dispute over the way President Trump kept his books involving payments to his lawyer and non-disclosure agreements, and that's what we got. This was all amped up to some sort of. As you pointed, not yet, but that's what Alvin Bragg wants. Felony?
Yeah, this is a case he could not bring because of the statute of limitations, just on the straight up merits of the allegation,
right.
The falsifying his record keeping. So instead, he attempted to use the felony angle, which would allow a longer statute of limitations, and to do that, he had to indicate that the underlying law that he was really trying to break by the falsifying of the records was election law through a payment that was made to somebody pursuant to a non-disclosure agreement. I find this, if people don't see what's really happening, and believe me, they do. We saw the election and how it turned out. This is the attempt to take down the man that the nation wanted as president of the United States, and to use the law to do so.
Alan Dershowitz he has a suggestion for Trump's attorneys. He's recommending that they file a writ of mandamus to the appellate court to basically say that Alvin Bragg needs to either force the sentencing here, and Judge Merchan either needs to force the sentencing now or just get rid of this thing entirely. Do you agree with Alan Dershowitz's assessment here?
Yes. So a writ of mandamus is for extraordinary relief. It's in essence asking the court, saying, look, this is such a unique circumstance that we need extraordinary relief. I don't like the idea of giving them the option of going forward on the sentencing. I think at this point, the dismissal is the only appropriate grounds, given the combination of the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity and what can and cannot be used against the president, and the violation of such during the trial, which I observed myself. There was evidence that was clearly privileged evidence, and evidence that would violate the immunity of the president of the United States. So you combine that with him winning the election, I think, rather than the legal motion of writ of mandamus, I would hope that they could get a ruling to dismiss the case. If they don't, then an immediate appeal to have the case dismissed for both of those reasons.
Do you sense that the higher courts are going to want to intervene quickly on this? Is this the kind of thing where, they feel obligated given the stakes? This involves the president of the United States?
I definitely do at the highest level in the state. The intermediate appellate court may not have the same sense, but your Supreme Court of the state and your Supreme Court of the United States would act very quickly, in my view, in order to avoid this one horrific result, which is a sitting DA taking down a president.
Yeah. It'd be a good idea to avoid that, especially given how frivolous and stupid the charges were in
Right.
the first place. I mean, it strikes me that what Alvin Bragg is actually doing, not doesn't just strike me, but I'm confident of it. He's fully abusing the law in an attempt to hurt a political opponent. And, we've got an entire media establishment that acts like this is totally normal and President Trump must deserve it.
Yeah, there's a normalizing that has gone on that has been particularly offensive to those of us who have sort of seen the rise of it in the criminal justice system. I mean, to put it in context for your listeners, this is akin to somebody taking their criminal code and picking somebody that they don't like, that they personally have, animus towards, and then combing through the code in order to try to bring something against them, in order to take them and punish them because they don't like them. And in what era and in what, under our Constitution, could we ever have imagined that somebody would be doing that?
Yeah, and as a political matter, it blew up in their faces too. That was the other piece of this. The fact that Alvin Bragg and Judge Juan Merchan decided to make this into a thing and pretend like it was serious, and that courtroom, which they've just absolutely destroyed the dignity of that courtroom in the way that they acted. That all added more support to President Trump. Every day that he stepped out, Brett Tolman, and spoke to reporters before and after each day's proceedings in that court, more and more people were supporting President Trump, according to all the available polling. So as a political effort, this ended up failing big time.
Yeah, and in particular with African American men. There's no cross section of our population that is targeted more frequently than African American men in our inner cities, and they related, and they voted for him in numbers that I don't think the Democrats ever thought was possible. And the reason they did is because they could relate with it. They could relate to what he was going through.
So by the time President Trump takes office, is it your prediction that all of these crazy sort of legal assaults will have fallen by the wayside?
It is my prediction. I am hearing rumblings that Fulton County is considering dismissing their case. Now, I don't know that that's accurate. It's coming from some friends of mine that are there in the area and are plugged in, but that's the first indication I've heard of that, and I think that's a big deal. I think there's considerable problems with Letitia James and her approach to continuing to want to target the president, despite the case, the laughable case that it became, especially to the appellate court. So, Jack Smith, I mean, this has got to be an immediate, dismissal of both cases.
Yeah.
What an absurdity to be pursuing that this man was the instigator of an insurrection, therefore should be prosecuted in Washington, D.C. for his role in election interference and insurrection. And the people just happened to vote him in the next election. I mean, come on, let's get the adults back in the room.
Yes.
Let's get control of the criminal justice system, and let's move on with an eye towards, impartial administration of the criminal law in this country.
I guess if there's any silver lining here, it's one that they didn't succeed in taking down their political opponent in this cruel way, and two, it just strikes me again that President Trump must have divine providence on his side, because the people who are going after him are some of the dumbest, most clownish people in the whole country. You couldn't ask for bigger morons to prosecute Trump, and it's great that it went that way.
Well, that was well said.
All right, Brett Tolman, thank you. I said it because you couldn't, I guess. All right, former U.S. Attorney, Executive Director on Right on Crime. Good to talk to you today, Brett.